All right, thank you very much for coming tonight. My name is Brad Washburn. I'm the Planning and Development Director for the town of Scituate. And welcome tonight to our second community forum, what we've been saying, a public workshop for the master planning process. We kicked this off in August 13th, I believe. This is the second in a series of 4 public workshops where we'll be meeting in groups like these to talk through the various issues and topics that are coming up in the master planning process. Tonight's theme is resiliency, and as many of you, if you saw the flyer or the invite, we'll be talking about not just in regards to climate, we're talking about infrastructure and municipal kind of capacity as well. I'm just doing a very quick kind of introduction to kick us off, but Emily Innes and her team from Harriman, who is the consultant leading this process, will be leading us through about 20-25 minutes of a PowerPoint presentation, and then like the first meeting, it'll be interactive, so you guys get to have fun with maps. No clickers this time, I'm sorry, but we will have some fun with maps. And at the end, please stick around because we're going to be announcing future meeting dates, and also I wanted to announce one meeting now. We'll announce this at the end as well. So we are doing a lot of planning. So for folks, guilty pleasure, I admit, I occasionally log on to Facebook and read some of the posts. And folks are saying, are we doing any planning? Yes, we are doing lots of planning. This being the master plan, which is the high-level document that kind of acts as the guiding document for all of our departments and boards in terms of the various topics that it covers, whether it be land use, transportation, infrastructure, etc. But we're also doing a lot of planning, especially along the coast right now. So I wanted to announce a meeting that we'll be having on Tuesday, October 29th at 7 o'clock at the Scituate Harbor Community Building on 44 Jericho Road. There's an initiative going on for the Scituate Harbor Sustainability and Resiliency Master Plan. Our Coastal Management Officer, Kyle Boyd, will be leading that meeting. But again, another important initiative to talk about long-term resiliency for the harbor. So for no further ado from me, I'll hand it over to Emily. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I know it started a little misty and is getting quite a bit rainy, so we're glad you're here with us tonight. I want to introduce my team. So Casey and James from Howard Stein Hudson. They'll be talking to you about infrastructure and transportation and circulation tonight. And Jess and Camilo, Camilo's in the back over there, also from Harriman, who prepared a lot of the data and the maps that we will be working with tonight. So just to talk to you a little bit about what we're going to do, we're going to kick off with the threats, so starting off with the bad news, and talk about what those means in what those threats mean in terms of resiliency. As Brad said, we're not just talking about sea level rise and climate change. There are other things that go into resiliency, so we'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about some of your existing conditions and how those may be both assets, but also threatened by these resiliency issues. Talk about some of the recommendations that have come through the planning that you've already done, some of the process we've done to date in the master plan. But our focus really today is going to be on getting more information from you about assets that maybe we haven't mapped yet that you feel are under threat and what and where those are, and also your priorities as a community. So you're going to be helping us build a new map of Scituate. So we're looking forward to getting you started on that. So this is where we are. As Brad said, we had our first meeting on August 13th. We're in the midst of 3 thematic workshops. This is the first one. On November 12th, we're going to be doing a workshop on a changing community. And on December 10th, we're going to be doing a workshop on managing change. So you'll actually see a lot of these themes reappear, but be added to by things of demographic change, market change, economic change, just to bolster out the climate change. And then you won't see us for a little while because we'll be pulling this all together in a draft document with recommendations and then coming back to you all in the spring to talk about those recommendations and get a sense of priority and timeline from you. So this is what we're going to be talking about today in terms of threats. And there's a number of them, and some of them are physical threats like sea level rise and climate change. Some of them are threats in terms of the operations of the town. So we're thinking about if you have outside threats not under the town's control, how the town is able to access and address those threats. And so we'll be talking about what municipal resources are a little bit and what that might mean. We're going to do a little bit on demographics today, but the primary discussion of demographics and how they're changing is going to be on November 12th. So I invite you to come back to that. And we're also going to be talking about, again, a very little bit about changes in demand, but that's mostly going to be on November 12th. We couldn't fit it all in one evening and having you out in a reasonable amount of time. So in terms of sea level rise, now, how many of you all have been reading about sea level rise? All right, so you'll know that there are a range of projections, that the science is clear that there is sea level rising, but how quickly it rises and what impact it has when is still a subject of some discussion. So we've pulled a couple of different data sources on sea level rise and climate change. You'll see them today. So this first one is from NOAA, and it's looking at the actual projections. And we're choosing to show you through about 2100, a little bit above. Now I should say that the master plan's timeline is usually only 10 years. So looking out to 2100, see, well, it's kind of a ways out. Why are we doing that? A couple of reasons. One, first of all, with the master plan, if you think of it as being sort of the 50,000-foot view of what should happen in the community. So we're going to be talking at a very high level today. As Brian said, there's a lot of other studies going on that will be looking in more depth and over different timelines, and we encourage you to participate in those. But for the master plan, we're going to stay at a very high level, and the other thing that we're going to be doing is looking for information and ultimately recommendations of what you need to do in that 10-year period. Some of those recommendations will be for actions that kick off what might happen in a later time period. It's one of the reasons we're calling this planning process Scituate 2040, because even though a master plan is for 10 years, some of the actions you take within those 10 years will have impacts beyond those 10 years. And so that's how we're going to be talking about it. So in terms of looking at 3 and 5 foot, and we chose these for a reason, in addition to it being good NOAA data, what you should expect is in 2040, you should have a 100% chance of a flood at the 3 foot level. And by 2080, you will have daily inundation at a 3 foot level. This is from sea level rise. We're not talking about storms. In 2090, you'll have a 100% chance of 5 foot flood. And at 2130, which is well beyond our discussion for the master plan, it will be a daily inundation of 5 foot of sea level rise. So another way is to look at it in this timeline where you see sea level rise in the normal conditions, daily inundation, and then the chances of the flood. So basically what you can see is that you're going to get a flood, and then someday that flood is going to be the new normal. And you'll get another higher flood, and someday that higher flood is going to be the new normal. So what does that mean? You're already, these are actually pictures now of damage and flooding that you have already seen. You're already experiencing and far more familiar with the impacts of these storms than I am standing here talking to you tonight. We're hoping to tap into some of that information through. But this is actually from Google Earth. And so you can put this layer on and play around with it and see it yourselves. This is an approximation of what it would look like with a 3 foot sea level rise or flood, a 5 foot sea level rise or flood. I have to say they had a 10 foot sea level rise, but you'd have to wait until about 2180 to see that. So we're not showing that tonight because it is well outside our scope. So that's along the beachfront. This is the lighthouse here, and so 3 foot and 5 foot. And I should say this will be available on the Scituate 2040 website after tonight's meeting, so you'll have a chance to look and study these as long as you like. Again, looking at the railroad here, so you can see the railroad line there. So noting the 3 and the 5. And the reason we're showing these generalizations to you of how Google Earth is projecting this, is when you look at the map, and look at these areas on the map tonight, we want you to be thinking about what that looks like. Because, for example, if your railroad line gets flooded, it's going to be difficult for commuters to get into work. So one of the things we're going to be asking you to do, and one of the things Casey will be talking about, is where are these threats and what are those threats? Is it the inability to get to work? Is it the inability to get to a grocery store or medical services or something like that? The water department, one of the things we're also going to talk about is your current infrastructure and what that means. We've been doing a lot of research ourselves into your current water capacity, but note that your water department is in an area that's threatened by flood, which could impact water quality as well as access. Hammerock, again looking at 3 feet of sea level rise and 5 feet of sea level rise, and also remembering too that there are 2 bridges to Hammerock, and what does that do? And you can see here now, I will say that if you look closely at this, which we hope you go home and do, go to the website and do, you'll note that Google Earth projects the bridges as going down because its projection technology is not that good. So I think this looks a little bit worse for the bridges than it actually is, but you can at least see roughly where that sea level rise would be. So in looking at this, so this is a combination of the FEMA flood maps. Now FEMA, the reason we showed you NOAA is NOAA works with projections, FEMA works with historical data. So you have the FEMA flood maps, and then you have, and more importantly for this one, you have the category 1, 2, 3, and 4 hurricane, with the hottest color, the red, being a category 4, orange category 3, yellow 2, and green 1. And so this just sort of, again, as you look at these maps, think about where these areas are in your town. We picked up some data from, this is from data from the Massachusetts website that you can get to. So 30 to 45% of residential land in Scituate is within the 100-year flood zone. Fortunately, 0 to 13 is within the 500-year flood zone. Their data is not precise, but still within the 100-year flood zone, that is problematic. The other thing that we look at when we talk about resiliency are vulnerable populations. And so in looking at this, between 20.9, and this is doing it on a community-wide basis. The data, unfortunately, wasn't down to the neighborhood level. That's something we'll be asking you. But 20.9 to 31.6 of the population in Scituate is over 65 years old. 19 to 25% under 15 years old. So these would be 2 populations that are vulnerable to catastrophic events. Now this is Biomap 2, and what this looks at is the different types of assets in terms of vernal pools, wetlands, aquatics, trees, and the species that live within them. And this map, which is also from the state, you'll have a chance to look at that up online if you're interested in more detail, looks at those areas that would be prime areas of conservation because they have some sort of flora or fauna, some sort of threatened species in it. And so one of the things that this legend here identifies those species. So for example, the dark blue is the wetlands, this shaded area are the buffers around those. And so these are areas that the state has deemed as of particular concern to the state as a whole, not just the community. These are regional and state assets. And so you'll note that quite a few of them are along the coast. Therefore, they are threatened by sea level rise. They're also threatened by climate change. And so this data is from the U.S. Forest Service. And we wanted to show this to you because it gives an idea of what's happening across the country and how that's changing, in this case, from 2000 to 2100. So the current data here that you see on the left-hand side is always from 2000. This is the PCM, which is their lowest emission scenario. PCM refers to the study that was done. This is the Hadley, which is the high emission scenario. Basically, they use a set of 3 studies, both at low, sort of low, medium, and high emissions. And for the purposes of our high-level discussion tonight, we're choosing their lowest of the low emissions and their highest of the high emissions, so you can see what happens. So one of the things that we know about climate change is that the precipitation patterns and amounts are going to change. And in our area, we're going to get a lot more water, and you're going to get water at different times of the year. We have the same thing with the temperatures. The temperatures are going up, but they're going up at different times of the year. So I'm going to show you the water first. So if you look at the annual precipitation, you'll see sort of right about in there. That's between 1,076 and 1,225 millimeters. We all do this in inches, so I put the inches here. And then what I want to show you is how that changes. So in the low emissions scenario, between 2,000 and 2,100 is an increase of 12 to almost 14% in the amount of rainfall that we're going to get. In the high emission scenario, an increase of 26.5 to almost 28%. Now, they gave us the annual precipitation for May through September. This is where I want to talk about how it's going to change in terms of timing. So this was particularly important if you are a gardener or a farmer, but also if you, depending on when you enjoy which type of winter or summer sports can have an impact. So you can see here that our normal precipitation May through September, almost 18 to almost 20 inches. In the low emission, 19 to almost 21. Same is true here. Actually, in the high emission scenario, our May through September rainfall isn't changing that much. And you can see the percentages, it's a 10 to 11% increase. Where this becomes interesting is in the winter precipitation. So for winter, we're using October to April. Is that the winter precipitation is increasing significantly. In the low emission scenario, almost 14 to 16%, and the high emission scenario, 38 to almost 40%. And so if you're thinking about when you plant things, when you have, as I said, particular sports or particular economic activities, that's going to make a huge difference. Now, we might assume, being in Massachusetts, that all of that precipitation is going to be snow. But remember that I said that we are also getting warmer. So, and one of the things I should point out when you go online and look at this is look at how the bands of color shift. So you see this pink for Florida here. In a low emission scenario, that pink moves up to mostly northern Florida. In the high emission scenario, that's up to North Carolina. So also pay attention to our bands. This, which is less than 10 degrees Celsius, about less than 50 degrees Fahrenheit for mean annual. Suddenly we're creeping up to around 53, 54 degrees as our mean annual temperature. And then here we're getting up into 16 to 18 or almost 61 to 64 and a half. So if you look at this bright peach band, under the current temperature, that's southern North Carolina. So it's projecting effectively by 2100 that our climate in high emission scenario is similar to that of southern North Carolina on an average basis. And you can see the percentage increase in Fahrenheit here. Now, where you really see this happening is in the winter temperatures again. So that precipitation is highly unlikely to come to us in the form of snow. It's far more likely to come to us in the form of water, which has all sorts of impacts. So you can see here, if you look at the yellow band, mean January temperature right now, so New Jersey, Northern Virginia, under the low emission scenario, that creeps up to be our mean January temperature by 2100. Under the high emission scenario, it's North Carolina is creeping up to be our winter temperature. Oops, sorry. All right, and then finally, went backwards, the mean July temperature. So actually there's less of a percentage increase for July, but it's still going to get pretty hot for us. So low emission scenario, an additional 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit. High emission scenario, an additional 14 to almost 17%. That's problematic because of our older building stock. So if you think of it now, when we get a heat wave, I don't know if you've noticed, but everybody gets a little bit crowded in a heat wave. Our cooling days are expected to flip so that we have more need for cooling than we have need for heating on an annual basis. And if you are one of those vulnerable populations, the very young or the very old, that difference of having a longer heat wave in the summer is going to be a huge difference. So this is where this starts to think about our built structures and what that means in terms of the housing stock that we have now. And then the May to September temperatures, again, you see that higher increase, even not just in July, but across the May to September period. It also has an impact on our flora and fauna. And while Scituate has been to date and continues to be incredibly and rightly focused on sea level rise, we also wanted to talk about your tree cover in terms of what climate change can do to that. And so this is the final series of these maps that I will show you. Is right now up in this area we have maple, birch, beech, and oak pine. That's our predominant tree cover. Doesn't mean that we don't have other trees. We have a lot of other trees. But that's sort of when the U.S. Forest Service looks at that and says that is predominantly where we have. In the low emission scenario, we're looking at it switching over to maple, birch, and beech. In the high emission scenario, you can see this dark green popping out. That is the oak and hickory. So again, 2100's quite a long ways away, but this isn't going to be you wake up on January 1st, 2100, and all of a sudden you've moved over to oak and hickory. This is going to have an impact on the trees as we move forward, and with the resulting impact on your tree cover and on the birds, the animals, the other species that are dependent on that tree cover. So that's something to keep in mind as we look at where a master plan is now. You're not going to do a lot about the tree cover in terms of the next 10 years. But for example, street trees, which typically have a life of say around 10 years, and over time, the type of street trees that you plant are going to change. And so starting to think about now how you set up the conditions to continue to consider how that change happens is important. All right, in terms of municipal resources, we're introducing this topic today. This is going to be a topic throughout the master planning process. So all municipalities, not just Scituate, have this balance of thinking about resources. And as you consider what can be done from the town's perspective as opposed to private perspective or state or federal perspective, I want you to keep in mind that there are basically 4 buckets of resources. Operating capital funds are the first part, so it's the funding, but also staff and volunteer time. And I call this out now because staff and volunteer time, volunteer includes elected officials, appointed officials, people like yourselves in this room tonight. Those are resources that aren't often called out. And so we wanted to introduce that into your thinking tonight because that's going to be more and more important as we move forward with thinking about resources. And then very quickly, we have started to look at those vulnerable populations we mentioned and how they're changing over time. And so here, the 2016, you're 0 to 19, so you're young people still in school, maybe just going into college. You have about a quarter of your population in 2016, just under 20% in the 65 plus range, and then in the 25 to 64, the working group population, those who are supporting, back to the operating capital budget, the funding of the town in terms of property taxes. This is where you are now. We've started to look at communities in the general area that have a similar profile in terms of demographics. We'll be talking more about this on the 12th. And the Nazis saying get there. So finally, what does that mean? So preview of what's talking about on the 12th is that you have changing demographics. You have a changing profile of who's living here now and who's likely to live here in the future. You have a changing profile of the resources that they need as your population grows more elderly and perhaps for some of them who may be 65 now, 55 now, over the period of this, getting, in some cases, not all less able. In the cases of children, same thing. What are these heat and precipitation profiles doing to a much more vulnerable population? And then thinking about how the demand for different types of housing, the demand for different types of goods and services may play into that. We talked a lot of the class, the first meeting about the assets, why you're focused on sea level rise, the ocean and the harbor. We're high up there on the list, the beaches and the parks, but also MBTA transit, something that's threatened by this, and other current assets, the leadership, certainly from our experience, being very involved, and the fact that you have already done a lot of studies that can be wrapped into this. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the tree cover and the resulting species there. So I'm going to turn it over to James to discuss infrastructure.
Good evening. My name is James Stein from Power St. Edison, and I'll quickly go over some of the infrastructure that we have, predominantly the water and sewer networks and distribution systems in town. So this graphic here is kind of basically shows you where the existing water network is. And the town has two sources for obtaining its water, basically ponds, lakes, the surface water supply, and also wells that are located throughout the town. This graphic here also shows some of those ponds and also the treatment plants associated with those, and also in black here it kind of shows where the town wells are located. At one part of town that's not serviced currently, that's actually serviced by Marshfield, is the Hawk area. And the existing wells today are permitted with the DEP to withdraw approximately 1.7 million gallons per day. So this graphic here shows, just similar to water, shows sewer. Over here on the map, you can see these circles. These blue circles represent pump stations located throughout the town. And then towards the bottom of the graphic here, you can see where the wastewater treatment plant is located on that Driftway. Excuse me, currently that has enough coverage for 1.3 million gallons a day. It was upgraded in the early 2000 for an increased capacity of 1.6. So this graphic is pretty much represents a similar graphic that I showed you for water and for sewer. But what's superimposed on here is basically the existing FEMA flood maps. So for water, for instance, it kind of shows you in the blue areas, as previously described, the different chances of flooding. 1% shown in green, 1% also shown in blue. Quite clearly you can see on the sewer map, a lot of pump stations located in downtown areas. These would primarily be within 100-year flood. So some of the things we need to think about moving forward would be, emergency power to these pump stations, where that's located. Is it located outside of 100-year flood? And certain things we could do to be sure that these pump systems do not go down during some storm events. So this graphic here is slightly different. This graphic here shows what is previously described as what the sea level change is going to look like. Again, it's kind of similar to where the 100-year flood map is today. Again, showing you the ones that are more at risk, would be the sewer pump stations, and also the existing wastewater treatment plant, which currently is within the 1% from the flood map. So again, things we need to be thinking about how do we move forward in the next 20, 30, 40 years with containing sewage on site there, looking at emergency power services, to be sure that these things still operate during our storm events. This is a quick summary of some of the existing projects that the town has or is currently undertaking. The town is looking at some of the water issues that are ongoing in town. We're all familiar with getting growing water. So the town is dealing with that, looking at causes of that, and also replacing some of the existing aging infrastructure. Some of that infrastructure, for instance, for the hydrant flushings that we all see, a lot of valves associated with that need to be removed and replaced prior to flushings. Some of the flushings they're using are more aggressive flushing, and also cement lining remains possible after that to prevent groundwater. Looking at the sewer infrastructure, currently the town has 6 plans, or 6 phases, should I say. They've completed 3 of those. There are still 3 more to do, phases 4, 5, and 6. The town is currently looking at the timetable for those as well. And after that, I'll go through the case.
Hi everyone, my name is Casey. I'm from St. Hudson. And I'll be speaking on the transportation system within Scituate tonight. So, Scituate's transportation network consists of the town's roads, sidewalks, bridges, and trails. Overall, the town has approximately 30 miles of sidewalk as of 2004. There are 5 town-owned and managed bridges and 1 state-owned and managed bridge. There are 2 trails, the Herring River Trail and the Driftway Multi-Purpose Path, both located adjacent to the Driftway. And there are 114 miles of road, 96 miles of which are public roads, and 13 miles that are private, and 5 miles that are of the Chief Justice Cushing Highway. And a key component that really ties this transportation infrastructure together is road storm drainage system. The road storm drainage system really manages roadway water runoff and helps prevent roadway flooding. And currently, the town has 108,000 feet of pipes, 10,000 manholes or sewer holes, and 90 culverts. And culverts are tunnel-like structures that allow water to flow underneath roads and trails. Another important component of the town's transportation network is its transit network. The town has the MBTA commuter rail Greenbush line that runs through the town with 2 stops in North Scituate and Greenbush. The town also has the Greater Attleboro-Taunton Transit Authority Scituate Loop that runs throughout the town with stops in North Scituate, adjacent to Town Hall, and the Greenbush commuter rail stop. So the town's roadways are an important component to climate resiliency, but it's also very likely to experience faster degradation. So during the height of summer and winter seasons, extreme temperatures can really damage the roadways through the effects of materials that can really that can expand and be damaged, which can cause a lot of rutting and an increased amount of potholes along the roadway pavement. And some of the roads are also vulnerable to flooding, which is a big threat because when it comes to disasters, it can prevent roadways, it can prevent regular and emergency transportation access. The MBTA commuter rail station is also threatened by climate change. Both commuter rail stations are located within a 1% annual chance flood zone, including portions of the rail line. And the Greenbush station is also located within an existing urban heat island, which can really exacerbate the effects of heat waves and really high temperatures during summer months. So these 2 maps show the existing transit network as well as the existing roads that are within a 100-year flood zone. And as I said before, the town's roadways are very susceptible to sea level rise. North Scituate, Hummerock, and several roads that are adjacent to the shore are very susceptible to flooding. There are 16 roads in town that have been identified that are within a 1% annual chance flood zone, and And some of those roads are Hatherley Road, portions of the Driftway, and Gannett Road. And the transit network, specifically the MBTA train stations, are also very susceptible and can be threatened during a 5 feet sea level rise.
Thank you. So again, we're not going to talk about recommendations so much tonight as we move forward. And one of the reasons for that, as I mentioned, is because these other plannings or studies are going on. We don't want to jump too far ahead of more in-depth work that they're doing. But this is based on what we've already heard and on some of the previous planning efforts you've done. What I wanted to show you in the recommendations were the categories. So again, as we're talking about resiliency, resiliency is more than just that, dealing with the aspect of sea level rise or climate change that you've already started to do and that we expect to intensify in the future. It's also about how do you, as a community, essentially thrive in all aspects of the community. So looking at things that have already come up as questions and issues, such as drinking water, wastewater and sewer, thinking about the people who are here now and are likely to be here in the future, thinking about aging in place within the community, but also bringing in new people, new families. How does that work? Thinking about energy as a component and how that can drive certain choices that you may make. Thinking about the economy, particularly the tax base, but also those goods and services that people here or in the future may want. So what we're trying to do over this process is wrap in a lot of this discussion, partly under the idea of thinking about it in terms of resiliency, but also in terms of the other things that we talked about, the what is it that's actually changing, and how do you then choose to manage that change will be the subject of the next two. And then obviously, as we talked about just now about the transportation, the built environment, how do you adapt or retrofit buildings to help the vulnerable, and the natural resources, how do you, in addition to your magnificent harbor and coastline, how do you protect the interior of the town as well, and what does that mean? So the next stage of that is we have a map of Scituate on these three tables, and I think we'll move them out a little bit more so you all can gather around them. On each table or at each map, you'll find an overall map of Scituate itself, so you can sort of place yourself where you are. And there's also a legend that tells you what's on here. And so the things that you'll see is the sea level rise, or are the sea level rise, and what they are in terms of current daily low and high, 3 feet, 5 feet, and 10 feet of inundation. We also colored the buildings by their current property value and grouped those, because one of the things to consider as you look at this is what is threatened in terms of value. Frankly, if we're looking at municipal resiliency and the tax base, how much of your higher value properties are under threat by this, and what does that mean in the future? We've also identified open space, ponds and streams, the roads. When you look at the roads and the other infrastructure, think about those pinch points. Maybe there's an area of town that's fine, but to get somewhere else important, if that's flooded, that is a problem. So we have, for example, mapped out the direction to South Shore Hospital. And one of the things we're wondering is there a community, maybe an over 55 community, that would be fine, but they can't get to the hospital. So in an emergency, what does that mean? And then we've also marked out with little icons the rough area of where your current assets and vulnerabilities are: schools, municipal facilities, those over 55 places that we could identify, medical offices, grocery stores, the things that you may need to get to or you may want to protect. We also know we haven't captured everything. So the first thing we're going to ask you to do is spend some time looking at the maps. We're going to have stickers. If you see an area that you understand is, and have knowledge of it, is an area that you think is under threat, or needs to be protected, we ask that you write it down and actually physically attach it to the map. Do not be afraid to attach things to the map. Then just to give you a preview of the second exercise we're going to do, after you guys have all had a chance to sort of really get familiar with it, is we're going to ask you to prioritize those areas under threat. And then at the very end, we're going to put it all together, we're going to lay it out on the floor, and we're all going to step up on those excellent risers and see what the dots that you put on here tell us about areas of threat. So that's where we're going. We'll kick off. Jess and Casey are putting down stickers and pens now. Please come on up. If this is a little bit too close, we'll, yeah. I got that.
Sorry, I'm going to sidetrack you for just 1 second. I know so thank you to Emily and the team for the great presentation. It was a lot of information, and that's a lot of good information, but I want to actually show you right now, before we get into the interactive exercise, where you can find this on our website. So bear with me for 3 seconds. I'll show you. It's really easy. So that if you wanted to download this presentation tomorrow or just follow this process as it goes along, you'll know exactly where to look. So just wait 1 second.